bigger you get, the more staff you add, and how you pay yourself can be in the gross profit margin or not in the gross profit margin. So I've learned that over the years of how business owners want to judge their gross profit margin. Where does that line hit to where at the end of the day, what I'm ultimately looking for is, if you want to check Rocky for $1.4 million, how much are you willing to hand your marketing team to make you that amount of sales?
Hey, it's the Profit Answer Man, Rocky Lalvani. If you're new to the podcast, check out my interview with Mike Michalowicz. It's episode number 2. If you want to hear about each chapter in the Profit First book, go back and listen to episodes 3 through 13. Episode 1 is the why and how. On the Profit Answer Man, we learn money mastery without all the complicated accounting mumbo-jumbo, using a simple system. Your accountant is busy documenting your transactions and creating a rearview mirror of what happened. My guess is you don't even look at the reports they sent you. If you're like most business owners, you struggle with this, and it's not your fault. We aren't taught money in school, and accountants aren't taught how to be profitable. The Profit First system created by Mike Michalowicz works, and he certified me to help you implement the system in your business. Remember, the new equation is sales minus profit equals expenses. Let's face it, without cash flow, you can't pay your employees, buy needed materials, or pay your mortgage and support your family. I help you to do that and more, so you can focus on the parts of the business you love and receive the rewards for your labor and investment into your business. The stronger you are as a business owner, the more jobs you create, the better we are as a country. Small business owners are the backbone of America, and for that, you deserve to be well rewarded. Just remember, more revenue does not equal more profit. That's why we focus on the bottom line.
Every month on the second Thursday, we've got a live Q&A to answer all your Profit First questions. There's a link in the show notes to sign up. I made it easier because the old system was too difficult. So check it out. Hope to chat with you and help you be more profitable. You know how I feel about overspending on poor performing marketing efforts. That's why we're back again on this. We're going to talk about the right KPIs for your revenue generation. How do you set the appropriate marketing budgets you need to get the sales that you need to thrive? That's our goal for today. And the biggest thing is not wasting money and time in places that provide no sales and no results for you. You've heard me say this. If you don't have targets and scoreboards, how do you know if it's working? And where in the process is the problem? What if you had a crystal ball to answer all these questions? Well, today, our guest is going to share just that. Joshua Ramsey is CEO of Strategic Point Marketing. He's been doing this since 2001. He has led over 80,000 successful campaigns. He works as a Fractional Chief Marketing Officer. What does that mean? It means that you don't have to pay a fortune to get A players on your team to help you achieve and solve this. You know, as Dan Miller says, actually it's Dan Sullivan, who not how? Who can help you achieve the results you want, not necessarily so much that you need to wear another hat. Let's meet Joshua and find out how. Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Josh Ramsey. It's great to have you join us today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a Fractional Chief Marketing Officer. And to give you a little bit of a story of why I do what I do, I think it helps to understand my narrative. So in the late 90s, early 2000s, I sold media for my career path at the beginning. So I did transit advertising, marketing in the way of like media placement, ads, online, digital, and so forth. 2004, I moved to a full stack ad agency, top 100, elevated myself. And then 2009, everyone remembers the great economy of 2009. And at that time, I organically needed to start my own ad agency. So I did that. And then after 10 years of doing that, I took a little bit of a break and reset myself and looked at the market and figured out, I'd rather guide companies than sell companies. So that's why I move into the fractional CMO world, is to help guide companies on the best choices rather than sell them a product that maybe they don't need at that time.
What an amazing concept. Selling a product that they don't need. It seems like so many business owners buy stuff they don't need.
Guilty. Here I am too.
The worst part is when you sign up for the trial and you forget to cancel it. And 9 months later, I go, hey, why are you spending all this money on all this stuff? And they're like, what?
Yeah, exactly. Again, guilty. You get set reminders on your calendar to shut it off. So
that is one way to do it. The other way for people who are really bad at this is, I'm going to put in a plug for this. Well, I'm not going to say that. Citibank has virtual credit cards. And what a virtual credit card allows you to do is create a number, put it in, and expire it next month. And you can make 100 of them. So when you sign up for a trial, you go ahead and you do this. And when they go to renew, it dings. And then they start emailing you and you go, I ignore you. And you move on with life.
Very interesting. Yeah.
The other thing is, if you're stuck in all this stuff and you can't get out of it, call your credit card company and go, hey, I think I lost my card. Can you send me a new one with a new number? And they will close the old one, tell them not to transfer anything over, and start fresh. And then everything will ding. And then you have to make a choice, credit card by credit card transaction, of whether or not you want it or not. So funny, we're here to talk about marketing, and we're here to talk about good marketing versus bad marketing, and also overspending on marketing. What I have found for most small business owners is they can't answer a lot of simple questions, which are, how many leads do you have? What's your conversion rate? What's your best source of leads? And how much are you spending per that lead source? The more and more of this information we can get, the easier it becomes to decide where to put our money, where to increase money, where to cut spending, and where to see that we're just flushing money down the toilet because we thought that's what was happening. The reality said something different. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, how much more can I build up into what you just said? I mean, you just took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, it really is a lot of times identifying the cost per lead and the cost per sale by lead source. I mean, that's exactly what I talk about all the time. And the marketing side is the CMO for a lot of different companies. So really honing in on that and then looking for what I call leverage points, because again, when you advertise on something like organic or paid online ads, you're talking about inbound marketing, people looking for you. But your message has to change when you do something like a television or radio or print. Your messaging has to really be modified, and therefore your landing pages need to be modified. And even if you go granular with that, let's say that I'm just going to pick a pest control company, because everyone understands the need for pest control. And if you're advertising for ant pest control versus, say, roach pest control, while the pest control company would use the same technology, they would want to advertise differently and their message would be different. And therefore their ad cost is different if they don't do it the right way. So there's a lot of granular that we could go through just in that little, for instance, of how many different categories in one company could you have, and how you go about advertising it in the messaging, and how Google even changes what they charge you for a lead if you don't have the right messaging on your page. It's called quality of ads.
Let's dig into all of that. But before we do, I have a quick question. Who really knows who the avatar customer is and why they're buying? Because I sometimes see that the business owner just throws money and figures the marketing company will figure that out. And the marketing company's like, no, you didn't pay us to figure that out. And you refuse to do the work to help us figure that out. So who is it?
Well, I think it's a combination. Generally speaking, as a CMO, when I walk into a relationship, is identifying your target audience, whether that's an avatar or a bio. And I think sometimes those get confused a little bit, because if you can create an avatar, at least this is how I read it. And I think the nomenclatures can change from person to person or industry to industry. But I look at an avatar to say, this is an exact profile or buyer. But a bio would be more of like, here's a wide range of who we want to target, right? It's like a household income in a certain zip code. You wouldn't really have that being an avatar. You would have that being the bio. Like, this is the detailed of who we want to target audience. That's a lot of times what you look like when you do the lookalike audience on social media, or, Facebook, call it meta ads, So I think kind of understanding that, but then it becomes a conversation with the CEO and executive staff with the CMO to understand who you're trying to target, why you want to target them, and then understanding what message they want to hear. It was once said by a marketing guy. He said, marketing is real easy. Figure out what your audience is thinking and say that to them. That's it, so.
And along those lines, I think what happens is too often business owners are much more technical. So they tell them how great their process is, but clients don't care about your process. They care about their problem and the result. And so you have to talk about the problem, the way the client describes it, and the result they want, the way the client describes it. And so if you're not listening to them and kind of getting their words to essentially hand back to them, you're not connecting.
Again, well said. There's a lot to it, and it's not necessarily a simple process, but I think that's why it has to take a team effort to really put it together and then craft that message. And I think this is also important for people to understand, and a lot of what you and I want to chat about today. But I oftentimes in the marketing world, I separate things. And one of those separations, it just creates clarity. And in that clarity, we talk about strategic messaging versus tactical marketing. Your strategic message is the craft of your message and what it says and what your core competency is and how to set yourself apart from others. Within that, you have things like your USP, your unique selling position. The tactical marketing is where you place it. So each strategic message then has to match your tactical placement, and your tactical placement is where your ad budget comes in. So it's then placing that strategic message. And that goes back to my point of leverage points, because sometimes you have the best placement, but your messaging has to be tweaked. And if it's not proper, a lot of times you keep the placement, but you tweak your message before you just say, oh, Facebook doesn't work for me, or Instagram doesn't work, right? Because that tactical placement could be perfect. But again, if your message isn't right, that's where you start with your leverage points. And again, I say that's where you start with your leverage points in a vacuum of what I'm discussing. Everyone has a unique situation. So
let you tell us, how do we look at this? What should we be measuring for? How do we do? Because at the end of the day, we have one simple thing. We want to spend as little as money as possible and get the most amount of sales. So how do we do that?
Yeah. Again, I mean, great question. And it's such a long answer. I'll try to keep it, without getting too granular too much. But, your leverage points are really what you could consider a weakness in your strategy. But to understand that, you have to have your KPI metrics to understand this is the expectation of what I'm going to get back on a projection based on what I spend. The leverage points become, are you under leveraged or over leveraged? So for instance, you have law of diminishing return. At some point, you can only spend so much money in one ad category that it's not going to work. I'm going to use an example. I live in Texas, and really heavy in the South, there's a brand called Buc-ee's. And Buc-ee's puts a lot of billboards out there. So the other day, it was actually last week, I was driving from Austin back to Dallas, and I just saw billboard after billboard about Buc-ee's, just how far it was and all the different offerings. And it was just more and more and more and more. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, if they took down 2 billboards out of the probably 30 that I saw, would I still come to Buc-ee's? Probably. Well, what if they took down 50% of the billboards? Would I still go to Buc-ee's? Well, at that point, that could be law of diminishing return, where there's always a number of, is it really needed for me to drive 200 miles and see 30 billboards? Does it need to be more? Does it need to be less? And sometimes that's unknown, but that's where you figure out your leverage point. You understand that there's a law of diminishing return for that leverage point to know, okay, at this point, I've spent too much. I'm at 30. I don't need 31, right? But then that takes understanding. Now, I'm probably using a hard example for us to pinpoint, but you kind of get a better idea when you start thinking in that process.
I think they need 30, and I'll tell you why. Because I know as people are getting closer and closer, the anticipation is just growing and growing. If you haven't been to a Buc-ee's, they have built an experience, and it is unbelievable. And so they do that.
Let's stay on that for just a second, because here's where, as a CMO, I love the iron sharpens iron, right? Let's have a fun argument here, right? So as we both smile at each other, we shake hands, like, let's have a fun argument, because I would debate that maybe it's 30, but now it's how often do you see it? What if you're 200 miles away and there's 15 in the first 5 miles? You've now overspent your budget in the first 5, but because you didn't get granular. So let me use this explanation. When we do online ad placement for movies or streaming or shows that are coming out, you have this, what's called the ramp. And the ramp up is basically you trickle the information months ahead or weeks ahead, depending on your ramp, your runway. Some people use the word. But what happens is, if you watch carefully, that ramp starts low with a small little sprinkle. And then as you get closer to that time of launch, it starts to go up, where you have more and more and more. And then it's like the week of that Wednesday to Friday, when it publishes and goes live, and you can go see that movie on Friday night, that Wednesday to Friday, they probably spend about 60% of their entire budget than they do the however much time of the runway that they started. Right? So I think that's part of that leverage point. And that's also part of understanding when you're spending the money at the right time. And then it becomes the aftermath, right? The post-show marketing of, hey, we published this show. We had this many Americans or whoever come see this movie, and here was the time frame. So then you also have to take a percentage of your budget for the post-show of showing the results, building social proof, and follow-up. I'm going to kick that back over to you, but that's just something to kind of consider, that I think a lot of people look at it and they go, exactly what you said. Oh yeah, 30 is what's needed. Right. But could it be 35? And then what's the placement? What is the frequency?
And that does make a lot of sense. I mean, with Buc-ee's, it's easy. You're driving down a captive highway, which is different than for many businesses, because then we have to start mixing it up. If I were a different business, billboards may or may not work. In some of my clients, we're going old school postcard because it's so much cheaper than online. Other businesses, where is your client hanging out that you can reach them and do that? So I think it's also understanding that. That's the thing that people tell me. I go, well, where'd they come from? They're like, well, we're not sure. We have TV ads and we have the website, and we do these sponsorships, but A, the client can't tell me where they came from, and B, they haven't built a good tracking system. So I don't know if you all know this, but if you come through the internet, everything is cookied and tracked. And so people who have good tracking systems can actually watch the journey, see how much time you hung out on the website, see all the clicks you made, see where you spent your time in your journey. That's why all your potential Christmas present purchases are showing up across your web browser.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to the tracking, there's something to be said about the holistic of everything that comes in and what your marketing dollars are, but then the granular of each different platform that you use, right? And that's where you get your leverage. Your leverage has to go by platform, but then your holistic, is going to be your overall, this is how many leads as a whole came in, referral, paid ads, television, billboard, whatever you're going to do. And that's where you kind of balance that out to understand, each vertical that drove in that lead, but then holistic as well.
So most small business owners don't have the budget that Buc-ee's does, nor do they have the help. So right. How does the little guy deal with all of this? Because it seems overwhelming.
Well, again, that's why, a lot of companies will hire a fractional CMO, right? Because what they're trying to figure out is where do they place their ads with their budget, and how is that going to affect them? How is that going to help them grow? So I came up with a program that I call it the crystal ball of marketing. And the crystal ball of marketing starts off by figuring out your gross profit margin. How much is our sales goal? So let's just say it's like 1.4 million.
People in the marketing space tend to ask that question percentage wise. Like, how often are marketers even concerned about gross profit?
I would say it's like 2 to 3% of marketers. I love the question, but so allow me to jump in as to why, because we kind of touched on this in the beginning. What you find is when a business owner walks out to place an ad, the typical process would be they go online and they look for something like digital ads, right? Pay-per-click, SEO company. So then they walk in those virtual doors or physical doors and they go, hey, I want to get a website. Tell me how much it is. So they go through the sales process. But what happens is they go through a sales process of what that company sells, not necessarily what your company needs. The business owner, right? You're just working on the sales side of an agency that sells a website isn't going to say, oh, you only need this much, when that's probably all you need. They're going to go, oh, you need this full package. So instead of just spending $5,000 or $10,000, they convince you to spend 30, 40, 50 when that's not needed. But a CMO's job is to come in and say, look, this is all we need to spend to get this. And the rest of our budget needs to be dedicated to these different categories, right? And we kind of started talking about that at the beginning.
And let's continue. Let's go on. Let's go back to the crystal ball, because I love that.
So the crystal ball is to be able to look at holistic as a company and say, what's our goal? So 1.4 might sound like a lot. And again, you have to be understanding and cognizant of people that are watching or listening to this, is to understand 1.4 for a roofing company isn't really that big, but an HVAC company, it may not be as big. But then when you do software, 1.4 could be a really large number, right? So I think if you take it within the relative understanding of what 1.4 is. So in this, for instance, we're just going to use the number 1.4 million is the sales goal. Well, with the crystal ball, you start with the logic, because again, business owners will come to me all the time and they'll say, Josh, how much should I spend? And I go, well, what's your budget? And they go, no, you tell me how much I should spend. And we go back and forth. And I don't like that. So that's why I created this crystal ball, is because I take them through a logical step of, okay, if it's 1.4 is your sales goal, how much are you selling a product for? And we figure out their gross profit margin. So again, using a for instance here is you buy a product for say $19,000, and you resell that product at 30. So your gross profit margin is 35. Now, here's a little trick that sometimes business owners don't think about. When you set your gross profit margin, you get to choose how fully loaded that gross profit margin is. Because the bigger you get, the more staff you add, and how you pay yourself can be in the gross profit margin or not in the gross profit margin. So I've learned that over the years of how business owners want to judge their gross profit margin. Where does that line hit to where at the end of the day, what I'm ultimately looking for is, if you want to check Rocky for $1.4 million, how much are you willing to hand your marketing team to make you that amount of sales? And that's where, if we just fast forwarded all of this to that bottom line, that's what we have to identify. Is you have to go through all the metrics, your pure profit, your expenditures, everything down to, okay, Rocky, if I tell you that you're going to make, $500,000 on 1.4 in sales, and again, I'm just throwing out random numbers, right? Then I go, $500,000, Rocky, in your pocket. Would you be willing to give me 400,000? Your answer is probably going to be no, right? But you always come up with a number. And that number is really important, because then you reverse calculate, for me to get one sale, then I'm willing to spend X dollars. So this is starting to kind of get a little bit deeper. So guide me through, Rocky, to make sure that I'm explaining it in depth.
No, you are. I think where it goes wrong is too often they skip all the in between. And what I would hear marketing people go, if you put $1 in a machine and you got $1.50 back, you keep putting $1 in the machine. And they're like, yeah. And then I'm like, no. If you put $1 in the machine and it costs you $4 to return the sales or the thing, you're going to lose money every time you spend on marketing. And I think that's where the problem is. People overspend on marketing. A. B, they're not experts, right? They're experts at what they do, so they can't even manage their own marketers. And here's the reality of it. This stuff changes constantly. The algorithms change. What works today doesn't work tomorrow. And then the last part is building out the systems to actually track the KPIs to look at what that looks like. And I'd love for you to at least just touch on some of these different KPIs so people have to think about, what should I even be tracking?
Yeah, before we jump on that part, let me wrap this other part up just a little bit more to put it in a nice little bow. When we go back to the example that I was just talking about, the 1.4 is your sales goal. So for anyone maybe writing this down for notes, 1.4 is your sales goal. You're reselling a product at 30,000. That means for you to hit that 1.4, you can do the simple math to break it down to realize you need approximately 4 sales a month to hit your 1.4 with that vacuum of a conversation. So now the question becomes, where can you get those 4 sales, and how much do you have to spend to get it? Now, when I say how much you have to spend, let's be careful to understand. How much do you need to not spend, looking at your leverage points, to get those 4 sales, right? But I think that's a huge step when you just accomplish that information, to know how many sales you need to get 1.4. That at least starts to narrow down how many sales you have to have per month, per year, and then you set your goal on that. Now, some people are going to say, well, I sell one job at 30,000, and then I sell 5 more at 15, and then another one at 50. Well, you just take your median, right? However many jobs you're selling, the percentage, and you figure out the median. That should be simple enough for people to understand. But I would tell business owners, don't get caught up in the minutia of it. Get caught into, what is your average sale? Not, hey, I sell a 50,000 job one time, but the rest of them are 20, so I'm going to average it out at 40. No, you got to be honest with yourself, because if you're not honest with yourself, then you're only failing yourself. So as we transition this into the tracking side, Rocky, I'd shared a story with you before. And just to kind of keep it short and sweet, had a business owner come to me. We ran all the calculations. We set up ads. We ran ads, and we were generating a great amount of volume of leads, not sales, but leads. He told me before we even started the campaign that if I put him in front of these people, he would sell them. He could do 80+%. I said, well, that's not true. I said, you're dealing with apples, not watermelons. You're closing 80% of an apple, not 20% or 30% of a watermelon. So I brought his sales number down and said, look, I just want you to close 30. That's it. We ran the campaign. We tracked it. And when it came back and we looked at the numbers, he was angry because he said, I didn't make the money you told me I would make. I did this. I did all this. Here are my margins. Here's everything. And I didn't make it. So we looked closer at it. And the first thing I looked at was, what's your closing percentage? His closing percentage was at 24%, not 30, not 70, like he said. It was at 24. But because he wasn't honest with himself, I mean, take me out of the equation. The business owner's not honest with themselves. There's not a whole lot that a marketing person can come in and do for you. They can generate more leads, but the entire equation of budget spending shifts when you realize that your closing percentage, if you're not truthful with it, right? So I can move into tracking, but you, I guess within a pun, do you track what I'm saying?
I do. And I want to make this point, and let's just make this simple. I'm going to say a 33% close rate, which means you're selling 3 a month at 25. Actually, the math is backwards. The point is, if you're not hitting that number, that differential might be your overhead. And that's what takes you from positive profit to negative cash flow because you didn't sell enough to cover your overhead, which is what happened with this gentleman. If you don't even have tracking, if you don't have a scoreboard, how you can't even know that. So let's make this simple for the listeners. You go to a baseball game. They don't have a scoreboard. They don't track the swings. They don't track the strikes. They don't track anything. At the end of the day, the guy throws a number out. That's what I think the score was today. You're going to laugh, right? Just like you're laughing. But how many business owners are spending considerable amounts of money and don't have scoreboards? It's my gut feeling. Okay. Gut feeling's wonderful, but numbers don't lie. And the more and more we put numbers to each of these different metrics, the more and more we no longer have to point fingers. The more and more we go, the marketing worked, your sales didn't, or your salesperson didn't. What I see more often than not is the marketing works. We got 20 leads this month, and I passed them out to 5 salespeople. 2 salespeople are crushing it. 1's hitting the number, and 2, let's just say it ain't happening. And now at least I can figure something out. Those are the 2 salespeople I need to work on. Is it a training issue? Is it something like now I can do something with it and we can start to improve? Otherwise, it's everybody pointing fingers at everybody. Everyone's screaming in chaos. So having numbers, the more numbers we get, which I know people hate but the better we get at this and the more you automate this and the more it becomes systematized, the more money you get to keep. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah. I mean, we continue to go down a great path of conversation here when it comes to budgeting, right? And I would say to kind of build into that of the numbers that you're talking about, I use a simple equation when you don't have those numbers readily available or you're trying to start right now to get there. I use what I call the law of the thirds. So the law of the thirds is kind of a loose evaluation, but it gives you a KPI to start with. You got to have something of a guess to be able to figure out where to go. So you use the 33%. I use 33% as the industry standard of when you take, 3, 4, 5 salespeople and you throw them out there and you kind of expect the 30%. Well, if you're looking at it, you go, okay, I have to get one sale. Then the law of the third says that you need to have 3 qualified leads to get one sale. But out of that 3 qualified leads, you need to have six leads that have at least identified themselves to you as a potential to become qualified. And then from that 6, you basically take it up to around 20 to 25 to be able to say, I need 25 in that range for me to get 6 that are going to filter through. And then you have what's called leakage in your funnel. And that leakage is always going to happen. But now you go to where I think a lot of people have failed. And this has been like a really key part for me lately with a lot of clients is the opportunity time. And the opportunity time is real simple. When someone contacts you, you have basically 3 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes to be in touch with them in some capacity. So you can automate text, you can automate emails, you can, send a phone call to them. There's a lot of different ways now to communicate to your salesperson as soon as that lead's identified. And that drastically increases. But then the long tail after that is also important that can be automated into a funnel system. So when you talk about tracking, it really depends, again, on the granular level of what are we going to track, of where the lead comes in, and then how fast have we communicated with them, how long do we communicate? And this is why the CMO really can help a company out, because it's identifying the leverage points and growing into that of what is most leveraged right now. What do we need to build in what order? And what are you currently doing well? And what you need to really step it up, and what's your priority? And if you'll indulge me for just one more second, Rocky, when people go to build a website, a lot of them don't understand what I'm about to say, but hopefully this will open some eyes up. When you start something, there's always a core competency of what needs to be done. But having the experience to know that core competency is extremely important. Whether it's building a car, building a house, building a marketing campaign, or building operations for your company, there's always that core competency of what you do first. And I think that that's a key of understanding that every machine is going to be different. Every marketing system is going to be different, but the comprehension of why buyers buy does not change. It goes to just human intelligence of how buyers buy.
It does. And again, the more we have data, the faster we can get it and the quicker it moves. It's amazing. So it reminds me of a story. I haven't told this one. When I first started out in sales, like I had a cell phone, but it was 90 something cents a minute. So I wasn't picking that thing up very often. And what we would do is we would call into the office twice a day to get our leads. Right. So, it's a question of how often. I'm like, I bought a pager and I'm like, every time I get a lead, page me. So if somebody called the office, within minutes, I was on the phone with somebody. Now, in today's world, that whole thing has come down to milliseconds. Like I go put something in online sometimes and my phone's ringing before I'm done. But the first one there usually wins. And so it's also building out those systems to be able to do that, to have the speed, to make sure your salespeople are picking up the phone. All of these different things are metrics that have dramatic effects on end results. The audience couldn't see this, but Josh showed me stuff. A lot of what Josh showed me actually sits on top of what we do. We track a lot of these metrics, but I don't go into the details that somebody like him would. But when I've got a guy like that who can take care of the marketing and we all flow together, it becomes so easy to go, oh, there's the leverage point. This is where we need to put the money. This is what we're expecting as results. Now let's test it and see if it's true. So I love what you're doing.
Kind of piggyback on that a little bit. And one of the things that I love is I like to disrupt. I think some of the best marketing people out there are disruptors. I'm not one of those guys that go around cursing all the time to try to disrupt, but I like the disruption that's a little more PC, a little more palatable for the majority of people out there. But when I talk about disrupting, I like the whole phrase of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Do you agree with that, Rocky?
I do.
So I'm the disruptor that says, I absolutely disagree. And here's how and why I disagree. I can take that horse out and I can run it in 100-degree heat and not let it drink water for a solid day. And by the time I lead that horse back to water, it's going to drink. Right? So when you just said a couple of little buzzwords to me, it made me think about it. And I said, okay, so how do we make that horse in the marketing world? How do we do that? How do we run that horse at 100-degree heat? And the answer that I bring to the table isn't just the tracking or the marketing, it's all of it. And in the bigger picture, when people buy, they buy on 3 core ideas. The first one is advantage to ownership. Why is it that I want to buy whatever's being sold? They become identified buyers in their own mind. The next step is objections to ownership. The objections are when people say, I don't know if I really need this, or they're trying to become educated about it. So price is one of them, but is it going to really solve my problem or fill my need? Do I want to buy it? This is objections. The third one is vendor selection. And that's what you're talking about. The fastest one there wins. But I believe strongly that if you do a good job of overcoming objections in the learning process, it will change the time of who will communicate with you versus someone else. They may wait in line to work with you because if you've overcome their objections and you've done a better job educating them on the advantages, and you've done a better job separating yourself with what I call the USP, unique selling position, and you really have set yourself apart, when it comes to vendor selection, that buyer is going to be more picky because you've set the bar much higher than your competition. Therefore, you stop working on vendor selection. Therefore, you spend less per lead when your marketing and communication is done right. And I'll pause on this and kick it back over to you. The saying that I live by is have something good to say it well, and say it often. And saying it often doesn't mean you have to spend a lot of money, but if you say it well, you can communicate to a smaller audience. If you communicate it well, you bypass the vendor selection, and therefore you save that budget money because you've done such a fantastic job of communicating your strategic message.
I'm a big fan of They Ask You Answer, which literally is you create within your website or systems, you answer all the buyer's questions. You take them down the roadmap. And all of this happens before they're still out looking. They haven't picked up the phone to call yet. The 6 vendors. In that case, the other 5 don't even get a phone call. And so I totally agree with you on that. And that comes down to marketing, but all of that comes down to before you even spent $1 on, before the stuff went out, you've got to build out all those systems and have it ready. So when they come and they see you, they immediately go, oh my God, this is the one that I've been waiting for.
And, when we go back to leverage points, I just thought about this. I have it sitting here on my desk, so I'm going to show it here on video, but I'm going to speak through it. Too often times when you send out, and you brought this up, postcards, the postcards, they always say that the front of the postcard is the side without the address. And the side without the address is actually the back of a postcard. The front of the postcard needs to have a big, bold headline that is engaging and educating, where a consumer, whoever your audience is that gets that card, doesn't have to flip it over, because they say with a postcard, it's left hand, right hand, trash can. So you only have 2 seconds in between left hand and right hand. But how does mail come in your mailbox? It comes with the face up is the front of the card, which has your name on it, because that's how the mail office sorts it. So the first and most engaging headline should be right next to your audience mailing address is, so that they want to flip it over and learn more. And you better be ready to draw them in and give them an easy offer, an easy education of whatever your KPI is. Is it to get them to do something or just brand your name? And I think that also now goes back to your KPI of expectation when you spend your budget. If you send out 1,000 postcards and you spend $5,000 sending out a jumbo postcard, you have to know what you're wanting to get back from it, right? And that goes to your benchmarks or your KPIs tied back into your budget, tied back into tracking, right? So everything kind of comes back together.
I agree. It all ties together. So I think we've gone deep. For many people, this might be overwhelming. However, I think you help them put this all together. So can you just kind of close us out with that and how that works?
Yeah. So again, Rocky, I really appreciate you being on. And, anyone that hears or watches this podcast, I would just say, I'm the type of guy that I love to help people. It's just a passion of mine, is to give. And I believe that if I create a good user experience and give good information, that the return will be there. It has been for all my years in business, over 20 years in business. And I just continue to see that happen. So what I offer to people is if they go to my website, which is jrcmo.com. It stands for Josh Ramsey, Chief Marketing Officer. So jrcmo.com. They can just submit a form online, or a contact form, and just mention, hey, I heard you and Rocky talking, and I'd love to go through what we call the crystal ball of marketing. And I'd be happy to walk you through that and help anybody and everybody to walk through the crystal ball of marketing so that they can have a clear vision of what they should be spending, how they should spend it, and what ROI to expect from every dollar that goes out the door.
And we'll put a link to that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Rocky. It's great being here.
Here's the truth. Most business owners can't get me the numbers we need to effectively analyze their sales success. And that's why I was excited to talk with Joshua about his. He can create the crystal ball spreadsheet, and he literally layers it on top of what we do. Okay, I get excited about spreadsheets. That's me. Maybe you're not, but this is how you get good scoreboards and tracking, and your cost per lead, cost per sale. All right, don't feel bad. Most small businesses don't have these metrics. Okay, it's just the reality of it. You might think they do, but most don't. At least from what I've seen. At the end of the day, sales starts with knowing how you sell and who you sell to and what they are really buying, and then creating great messaging that aligns with your target audience and putting that in the right places where they are so that you're fishing where the fish are, so you get the maximum return on your investment. Because you don't need to spend more resources. You need to be more resourceful in your marketing dollars. Okay? Remember to focus on the bottom line.
If you'd like for us to be a part of your profitability journey, we have different programs available ranging from do-it-yourself to one-on-one coaching. Our course, The Profit Blueprint, teaches you everything you need to know to transform your profitability. There are 3 different tiers ranging from DIY to done with you, so that businesses of all sizes can get the support that's best. Join the waitlist in the show notes to get more information and be a part of the next cohort. If you want a done-for-you service, you can hire us as your Chief Profitability Officers. We only work with a handful of clients, so they all get our full attention. We work with business owners who have or are growing to $500,000 to $10 million in revenue. You can use the scheduling link in the show notes to get on our calendar for a good fit conversation to see if we're the right people to support you and how we can help you.
This episode of the Profit Answer Man podcast is brought to you by SMBpodcastnetwork.com. The network is a collection of podcasts and shows from around the internet which focus on bringing you interviews with amazing guests who share actionable advice, ideas, and information for small and medium-sized business owners and entrepreneurs. Visit www.smbpodcastnetwork.com to find more great shows and easily subscribe to be notified of new episodes. It's a great way to discover quality content. If you've discovered us via the network, then I hope you enjoy today's show and will consider subscribing directly so you never miss our episodes. Remember to check out my other podcast, Richer Soul, where we talk about how to live the ultimate life and be the best business owner you can be. As we close out, let's repeat the mantra. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. Have an abundant and profitable week.